Hey guys, good Monday evening, and welcome to another episode of Community Conversations with Councilwoman Tameika Isaac Devine. I guess I could say, your host, Tameika Isaac Devine, and I'm really excited to have you guys here to introduce those of you who don't know someone who's become a very good friend of mine in the last year. And someone who inspires me. And then those of you who may already know her, hopefully, it'll teach you a little bit more about her. Y'all know one of the things that I always talk about is how important it is that we have um, good elected officials. And clearly, in the last, I don't know, 2 months, I have, being an elected official myself, I have heard and seen a lot of people talk about, quote, politicians and what politicians do or don't. And I can't get mad because I know that there are people who are really truly politicians. They're career politicians who don't necessarily do what they need in order to make sure that everyone that they represent is represented equitably. And y'all know that's the my term of 2020 is equality, and having equitable distribution of resources, and making sure that everybody has their voice heard. So anyway, with that said, I'm kind of digressing or getting ahead of myself and getting on my high horse about this. But before we get started, again, want to ask you guys, please share this broadcast to your friends, because the more people who are part of our conversation, the better. And so if you have any questions as we go on, certainly feel free to pop them in the chat, and I will put those out there. But community conversations, for those of you who might be watching this for the very first time, is my opportunity to communicate with the masses. When lockdowns first started mid March, I, as somebody who is a people person, I love, those of you who know me know I'm out all the time hugging. I love to hug people. I love to be out. And we weren't able to do that. And so I kind of went to this platform and started doing lives, and people started watching and started listening and started asking questions. And it just really confirmed to me something that was kind of in my spirit, is that, although we were physically and socially, really physically distanced, I hate the word social distancing, although we were physically distanced, we could stay connected through technology. And maybe have some deeper conversations than we would have if we were actually at a forum, because people are more apt to share in this kind of platform. And so their birth community conversations. And over the weeks, we have brought you really great content and great discussions about equality in America, racial justice, about helping our formerly incarcerated brothers and sisters on their reentry to society. We've talked about education, and so healthcare disparities. And so, anyway, tonight is not any different. We are having kind of a political twist to it a little bit, because my friend is also running for office. But it's really about what makes her qualified to run for office. And so I'm excited, guys, to introduce you guys to a really good friend, Adair Ford Boroughs. And so Adair is a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the Congressional District 2 here in South Carolina, the seat that is currently being held by Joe Wilson. Those of you who might not know the name certainly know of him. He was the person who yelled "You lie" to President Barack Obama during his first State of the Union address. And so full disclosure, over the years and over my years of service, I have had a pretty good relationship with Joe, in that our families have been friends for years. And I adore um, his family, and I have found him a good person to talk to personally. But as I serve the citizens that I serve, I just know that being somebody that someone likes is one thing, and I hope that we like our politicians, our elected officials, our public servants. But we also have to have people who will really do what's right and represent everybody. And so, with that said, several months ago, maybe a year ago, I endorse Adair Ford Boroughs for that seat, because in talking to her, I hear her passion, I see her heart, and I know that she's somebody who would do an amazing job at representing not just a second congressional district here in South Carolina, but everybody here in South Carolina, she would be an advocate and a fight for all people in South Carolina. So I thought this be a great platform as we were having this community conversations to talk to Adair, talk to her about not just why she's running for office, but really what makes her qualified to run for office, because I think that she has a very unique story in her background. Adair is an accomplished attorney and former public school teacher. She grew up in a double wide trailer in Williston, South Carolina. Those of you here in South Carolina might not even know where Williston is. So she grew up in a very small rural area of this dynamic state of ours. She's a daughter of a cabinet maker and a public school teacher. And she graduated valedictorian of her high school, and she received a full scholarship to Furman University and attended Stanford Law School, where she graduated with honors. She could have gone anywhere and taken her brilliance anywhere, work in big firms. But she decided, because she had a heart of service, she decided to begin her legal career at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., where she worked in the civil area. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. But then she later went on to clerk for U.S. District Court Judge Richard Gergel, who I know Richard very well. I've known Richard since I was in law school. Actually served with his wife Belinda while we were on city council together. And Richard, those of you may know Judge Gergel as the judge who presided over the Dylan Roof trial. Those of you who don't know the name certainly know the deed. Dylan Roof was the Charleston church shooter, where 9 people were murdered after Bible study at Mother Emanuel down in Charleston, South Carolina. And so Adair worked for Judge Gergel during that trial. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then she then went on to launch Charleston Legal Access, which is a nonprofit law firm. Let me stress that, a nonprofit law firm that provides affordable legal services for South Carolinians. And so she has definitely, you can tell from her background, her bio, that she is someone who has a heart for public service. And so I'm very excited that she has decided to offer herself as a candidate for the Congressional District number 2. And so with that said, you guys, please help me welcome Adair. Yay! Okay, that's my little clapping because we've got people, but I'm sure they're giving us likes and hearts and all that stuff, Adair. So with that, Adair, and I know I told you the first question I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And I've given that kind of the official bio, but I do want you to start off by introducing yourself to the audience about kind of really what they need to know about Adair, Adair the person and Adair the public servant.
Well, for one thing, in addition to my professional life, I am a mom of 2 kids, and you and I have had conversations about that too. And being a mom in a time of COVID, I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, 2 daughters who are just everything to me. An incredible candidate spouse, Brian, and he and I, like, our marriage vows were based off a passage in Isaiah 58 about lessening the burdens of others. And we actually made a vow to each other to support each other's compassion for people and to make our home a refuge for people. And so we built that partnership with that kind of really core shared value in mind. And that's what we've kind of built our lives around. And so you can see that in our careers, but we also have a partnership where we are definitely supporting each other's desire to help lessen some of the burdens in this very heavy world around things. So there's that. A big part of me was affected by how I grew up in rural South Carolina in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, we can talk about some of the problems facing rural communities today, but it was a real perspective that I came from. When I applied to college, I only applied to 2 colleges, Furman and Clemson. I wanted to go to Furman, and Clemson was a place I knew I could get money if I needed, if I couldn't find my way to Furman on scholarship. And I didn't really kind of dream as big then. And one of the things one of my favorite people in the world, Stephen Brown, who works with STEM education in rural South Carolina, Willistonian like myself, he was like, no, it should be like big dreams come from small places. And that's a mantra of his that I've now latched onto and borrowed and used over and over again. And finding kind of my life path moving and going to Stanford and DC and coming back. And a lot of that for me is about I've seen this almost other world now. I have this skill set to kind of really get some things done at a national level. But what I've seen in that world has been a lack of perspective. There are smart people, talented people, but our leadership at a national level is not nearly as diverse as we would want it to be, both in terms of race and gender, but also geography. Also, the rural perspective is not there in the same way that I would like it to be a lot of times. There's not very many moms in Congress, as it turns out. It's a really small number. And so a lot of what I want to do is be able to bring kind of some of those perspectives now that I have the tool set to really represent and get things done for the people I grew up with and for my community. I want to be able to bring that perspective to the table. So that's kind of what we're all about.
That's great. I think about kind of like when I first decided to run for office, and a lot of times I'm on panels and people say, what made you decide to run for office? And, it was similar, kind of the perspectives that I bring to the table were not there. But I also think that, having that legal background, you already love the law, but I think you're curious about how laws are made, what goes behind laws. And then when you see them enforced inequitably, it challenges you to want to do more. And so I do think that's why we have so many legislators that are lawyer legislators because of that. So do you think that kind of your legal perspective, especially, what you've seen through DOJ and clerking and, with Carolina legal, do you think that also gave you kind of that inkling of, hey, I'm already a defender of the law or trying to help make sure the law is applied equitably to folks, but let me see how I can do that somewhere else by being part of the legislative branch?
Absolutely. And part of what really attracted to me this run at the time that it was an advocacy position, right? And so one of the things members of Congress do is advocate for your state, for the people in it, with different federal agencies. And that's what I did as a lawyer. My time at CLA, my clients were amazing, and we did some really great work for families. And I like that advocacy piece. And one of the things that felt really missing in my congressional district was a number of times I had guys from my hometown who were veterans who said, I never got a call back when I needed help with the VA. Or different, the canal here in Columbia. That's something that we had the ability to fix at the federal level. And we had someone who not only didn't advocate for it, but voted against it and advocated against it. And we needed advocates here for our people. And I embrace that role. But there was definitely, I have seen a lot over my career now. That makes me feel like I'm in a good place to get in. And, one of the things we do as attorneys is we digest a lot of information, right? We've got the law, we've got the facts, we digest all this information and then have to take action and problem solve. And that's a skill set that I really like. I think of myself as a problem solver. That's how I got into the particular jobs I had. For instance, with CLA, Sally and I started CLA because we saw a need and no one else was doing it. This is a problem. And you know what? You're somebody, you can fix it. So we got into this gap in the legal services community. And, one of the things you have to do as a member of Congress is kind of be an expert on everything. And that's really hard with all these different legislations. But being able to take information, grasp it quickly, digest it, make good judgment decisions is really key. And on issues of race and equity in particular, one of the things I felt like was really missing in a legislative sense is addressing those issues systemically, right? Racism is systemic, which means if we're going to address it, we need to do it systemically, which means every single bill, every single piece of legislation, we need to be looking at issues of equity. And instead, the way we've kind of set up our system is with the people serving often is we have people that want to react like maybe to our current situation with one particular piece of legislation and then say we're done, right?
Mhm.
we pass something to do with criminal justice reform, now we're done. Or we pass something to do with equity, now we're done, instead of actually saying with every piece of legislation, we are going to look at this in a systemic fashion about how this affects different communities and making sure that it's going to impact people in a fair and equitable way. I wish we had done more with that with PPP, for instance. We've had a lot of issues, particularly with minority-owned businesses and some other shops getting access to PPP, and we can now see some of the structural problems and why that was. But thinking about those things beforehand, so that every piece of legislation has that lens and is fair and equitable, is something I think we need to approach. And so I was very interested in being able to kind of bring that to it.
That's awesome. And I think, again, like you talked about, that's really kind of the missing piece of like looking at something holistically and looking at the systemic issues and trying to figure out, we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but it's got to be something that's kind of constant. It's not going to be a one and done. It's got to be something that, we build upon. The Affordable Care Act. I mean, the interesting part, and Congressman Clyburn used to say this all the time when the Affordable Care Act first got passed. He would say it may not have been everything what we wanted, but, and so once it got passed, people couldn't get excited and say, people are covered, but it's like, and then what? How do we make sure that, Medicaid is expanded? How do we make sure that, the folks who are not covered get covered? And, it's constant. And he would equate it to the Civil Rights Bill. Like there was a piece and then there was another piece and you had to build upon that. The same thing here. What we're dealing with is systemic racism that has created whole communities that are struggling, from the small businesses to the families to in education. It's holistic, and here we in South Carolina we clearly see it. And so you're so right. We need someone we need people, not just one person. We need people who will be working to constantly build upon the successes and be able to make sure that all South Carolinians are heard. So I'm really excited about your candidacy. Let's talk a little bit about, because I think we can't have this conversation without talking about what we're seeing right now in our country. And, I tell people I'm always a glasses half full type girl, where although we are at a very hard and painful part of our country, this is all part of that process that we have to go through to get, come out on the other side. And so I do feel like a lot of people have said this is different. But I think I remember during the Dylan Roof trial, I sent Judge Gergel a note, because I think that people don't think about kind of all the things that, the judge was seeing, you were seeing, as kind of dealing with making sure that the process and system worked, because the process had to work. Whether you believe he was wrong, you believe he should have the death penalty, whatever, the system has to work, and so we need people in the system. But I remember reaching out to Richard and just saying, I just want you to know I'm praying for you, because I know it was hard. I'm just curious to know from your perspective, kind of being there through all that and seeing seeing the trial, hearing, everything that happened, probably more detailed than a lot of us in the public, really digested. And coming out of that, and then, fast forward 5 years later, where we are in this country. I'd love for you to share your perspective on that, and maybe how some of those perspectives you take with you and would implement as a legislative person.
Yeah, definitely. So my time at the court was so eye-opening for me on issues of race, and I had been involved in diversity and inclusion my entire adult life. From the time I was at Furman, I was with the National Coalition Building Institute, where I was trained in prejudice reduction workshops, and so I was in that. I led the efforts to rework the way we did hiring when I was at DOJ on issues of diversity and inclusion. But I think I didn't kind of grasp some of the criminal justice aspects really until I was at the court. And one of the things that we saw there, and frankly leading up to the Dylan Roof trial, was just the number of cases of stops, racial profiling kind of cases. And just like the sheer number of them and some of the things I saw there, it was like, wow, this isn't like a one-off thing, right? This is happening over and over again. And some of the things I started to note in those cases and trials was how much videos mattered, right? The video, the existence of a video or lack of a video could change verdicts very easily in some of these cases, and change believability and credibility. And so that was really kind of formative as I went into the roof trial, frankly, as to how much people want to who they believe and how they believe credibility without that video present. And so that was kind of all there for me when we started Roof, and that was a life-changing experience. I mean, you cannot live and breathe that case day after day after day after day for months without it changing you, which is where we were. And one of the things that I think was really important to Judge Gergel and to the team was that the process worked, that it was done correctly, and that it was done in the most kind of quick and efficient manner we could do and still do it right. One of the things that happens often in death penalty trials is they can go on for a very long time in death penalty cases. And so in order to make sure the community got some sort of resolution, not years and years later, we were working a lot of hours to make sure everything was done right, but also done in a very timely fashion. And we saw a lot of evidence that was hard to see. Frankly, we certainly saw it all beforehand when there were motions on what was going to be in trial, what was not, all of those things, and it was stuff to process. And the amount of hate, reading line for line every journal entry by Roof, going through all of that. A lot of times you like to believe that those thoughts and people that believe that type of thing doesn't exist, and it clearly does. And like you're kind of confronted with that every day, where you can not deny to yourself that that level of hate exists is I think a different place to find yourself. Something that impacted me the most in that case was working it alongside with a good friend of mine who happens to be an African-American male. And he and I worked on that case daily together. And I remember working late at night, we would, stop late, 9, 10 o'clock, go grab some food and come back. And we had a lot of security around the trial and people from out of state working security, and just not wanting him to walk alone in the streets of downtown Charleston, right? And here's this guy who is a world-class lawyer, degrees, law review at law school. And I'm like, I got to walk with you. I don't want you walking alone on the streets of Charleston. Like that was very emotionally impactful for me to do that and process that case with him in a setting where he might not be safe from law enforcement officers that were there to protect the court. Like that, that this is not okay. It's not okay. And going through that kind of with him daily, I think was very impactful for me. And I love him so much. And, one of my kind of salient thoughts is I don't want this to be a place where he's nervous about being. It's not fair. It's not fair, and it broke my heart a lot. So all of that kind of stuff happened at the same time. On actually the night of the Roof shooting, I was in a book club in Charleston that I've been invited to, and at that very Wednesday night, and said, why haven't we invited any Black people, right? And that whole conversation, but it's all tied together, right? And just, I felt like my eyes were opened to the extent and the consistency of issues in a way I might not have been aware of it before. I remember asking a friend of mine who is Black, I was like, how are you not constantly angry every day? How are you not yelling and screaming every day? How do you not, and because she's such a positive and uplifting person, and a lot of it was her faith and stuff, but she was like, we just can't, you can survive that way. Right. And so I think there was a heightened level of awareness from that time in my life that made me not willing to look away or ignore or move on with my life any single day going forward, without constantly asking that question, can we do something better on equity? Can we make this better? Is someone in my universe, in my personal universe, making things more inequitable, and can I fix it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting. Kind of one of the things that struck me from what you were saying is kind of, I think a lot of us would like to believe that level of hate is not there. But we know it's there. And honestly, when you look at the statistics that have been released by the Southern Poverty Law Center, that level of hate not only is there, but it is increasing daily in this country and has over the last 3.5 years. From that perspective, I mean, what role do you believe that you play in trying to either address that, specifically, as someone who would be a representative of Congress? I mean, what role would you feel like you play in addressing that or holding that accountable or, prosecuting it or whatever that is? What role do you believe that you in the government would play in that?
Yeah. So the number one thing for me, I think we're never going to make progress on issues of racial justice if we're not willing to be uncomfortable. Like we have to be uncomfortable and move. And so one of the things I have said to people is make me uncomfortable, hold me accountable. And I don't think it's my job to come in and say, hey, this is what would be best for the Black community. Like, I don't know. That's not my lived experience, right? My job is to have the tools where when the community comes to me and says, this is what we need, I'm like, okay, we get it done. Here are my levers. Let me pick up the phone. Here are my tools. Let me put them to work for you. So I very much believe in, like, I'll be representing people, but in empowering the solutions that people need in their community, whatever that is. And not being quite so quick to assume that I know what that is. I don't think that's kind of the best role of policymakers. I know, some people say to run for office, you have to be a little bit arrogant. maybe that's true, a little confident. But I really don't think, I am a big believer that the best solutions come from the communities that are dealing with them, and that the best solutions are derived from diverse perspectives on a problem. And so my job is to give voice to all of those voices that might not get as loud of a platform as I will have as a member of Congress. And if someone says to me, we've been having conversations with some business owners talking about access to capital through the SBA. Well, okay, I can work with the SBA to make that happen. But it's their idea, not mine, is kind of the way I'm viewing that. And we have to start looking, like I said, my job is also every single piece of legislation. I need to be proactive in gaming out, how does this affect different communities of color? How could it possibly be implemented in a systemically disequitable way? Because if it can be, it probably will be. We're kind of set up that way. And so is there something we can do on the front end that makes the implementation equitable? I'm a big believer that we can't just kind of have a good idea, put it on a piece of paper and walk away, because implementation is everything. And so we need to be proactive about those. And so that's kind of my big thing. What solutions does the community say they need? We need to get those in place. And then we need to ask these questions proactively on every bill, and ask the implementation question as well, to make things better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing is, my little commentary on that is also understanding, and I think that's part of the conversation now, like people who are really serious about the conversation we're having now are even willing to like self-reflect and be part of, those tough conversations you talked about, and even acknowledge where they may have caused hurt, even if they felt it was unintentional. And I will just go back, and I said in the intro, I mean, just to Congressman Wilson's, you lied to President Barack Obama. For him, it may have felt like, this is policy. This is not about him being Black. For those of us who are African American, and, and a lot of African Americans in his district saw it as a blatant disrespect. Your bias, your prejudice against the Black man who's president. And, after all these years, he's never apologized. He's never acknowledged that disrespect that the African American community has felt. And I feel like if we're going to get through this part, people of all positions and everything else have got to do some self-reflecting, and how are they part of the change in our country, and not doubling down like we see some, quote, leaders do on their behavior, which has really heightened and emboldened people to act some of the ways that they are acting. So that's my commentary on that. And that's one of the things I love about you, because I remember early on, you and I having a conversation about implicit bias and about, representing, folks of all walks of life. And I remember you talking about even starting CLA and some of the experiences you had in that, and making sure you were a voice for folks, but not being a voice where you were taking away their voice. You were amplifying their voice. And I've always felt that was very powerful, because I think we need more of that in leadership.
Yeah, and I think that's something, no matter what our positions are, we should be doing as far as self-reflection and willing to be uncomfortable. And something like, no matter what position I hold, whether it's in Congress, a nonprofit leader, an attorney, a member of a church, like no matter where I am or what my universe is, there's a constant question of, am I willing to be uncomfortable to make progress in this space? I need to be willing to raise questions like, why aren't there more Black people in the room? Who have we talked to about this? Even when it's uncomfortable for people, and to recognize my own issues. And I very distinctly remember, I've been doing work around diversity and inclusion and implicit bias since my college days. But I remember this moment. It was actually my summer in DC. So that would have been, I guess, when I was in law school. And I passed a man on the street and stepped over, and having the question about, why did I do that? Why did I not, why was I feeling anxious about getting too close in that moment? And, it could have been his race. It could have been, he looked homeless, right? What are these different implicit biases that make me instinctually say, let's give him a little more space on the sidewalk. And until we aware and deconstruct that and are willing to own it, that's part of me, it's not going to get better. Because you have to be aware of it to consciously change it. And so much of this is implicit. I've done diversity and inclusion trainings in the legal community for years now. And one of the, people get defensive when they say it's implicit. What does the word implicit mean? It means you're not consciously aware of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about being a good person, being a bad person. It means you're not consciously aware of it. And if you're going to make things better, you have to start becoming consciously aware of it, or you can't address it. And so finding every moment to do that, having friends that will help you find those moments when you miss them, are so huge. And it's something our leaders darn well better be doing, but it's also something everybody should be doing to help kind of deconstruct that. Otherwise, we're not going to make the progress that we need to be making on it.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. Hey, Gary. Gary Dennis says, hello. Sorry I'm late. Had clients to take care of. Gary, your clients are very important. So we're glad you took care of them, but we're glad you were able to chime in. Those of you who might have any questions for Adair, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will make sure I ask those. But while we are waiting to see if anybody has some questions, wanted to, I guess, address So based on kind of some of that, you know, I kind of led with how I feel like, you know, I'm a glass half full type woman. So I tell people I'm cautiously optimistic that we're really going to see some change. How do you feel? Are you optimistic we'll see some real reforms this time?
Yeah. So, so one time someone asked me, "Are you a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person?" And I said, "I'm a the glass will be full. Just give me a darn minute." Give me a minute. It's going to be full. So I am definitely optimistic. One of the things that I feel really good about in our current kind of movement and the protests and the things you're seeing on issues of social and racial justice is that there are more white people involved, right? There are more white people there. And if you want, you know, Adair's opinion on it, I think a lot of it has to do with videos. And that was certainly framed from my time in the court, where I saw verdicts change based on not whether there was a video. And I think that for probably a lot of white people who haven't realized how pervasive the problem is, the fact that videos kept showing up constantly, there was this increased awareness amongst people. It's like, oh my God, this really does happen all of the time. And so the thing now is to, like I said, once you get the awareness, and you have to do something with it. And I think that there is some increased awareness in the white community now that people are starting to realize, maybe for the first time in their life, just how heavy this is. And it is heavy, right? And then feeling out, how do I move forward with this type of weight? But I'm feeling very good because awareness is the first step. And I think right now there is a huge increased awareness of what's going on, of the incredible burdens that people of color face every dadgum day in the community. And that's really hopeful to me, because I think it's kind of the first step we need.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry about the interruption. That is the thing with live video, guys. So we're always live. So I was checking to see if I had any comments on this page to make sure if I had any questions. But I will say, so Gary basically said it all starts with teaching our children history, and not just the good, but the bad, that will allow you to capitalize on change for the future, which is so true. And I've taken every opportunity, as I know you have, Adair, to talk with my kids, my girls, about what has been going on and getting their input. And when you talk about the young people, I have to say, I'm so proud of my young activist. I call her. My 14-year-old is so entrenched in all this stuff, and we don't always agree. I mean, but we have great conversations, and her perspective is so different that I see the world changing through her eyes and others, because they're impatient. So they're not going to wait for some of us old folks to get it right. They're going to move us out the way if we're not getting it right. So I think that's interesting, which actually leads me to another question. So one of the things that everyone who watches me on, especially live, but anytime I have an opportunity to kind of talk, it usually kind of goes back to voting, because I just feel like voting is such an important role for us. We're coming up on, you know, the 100-year recognition of the suffrage movement and the women's right to vote. So I've been participating in some conversations about that. But I've had some young people say, "Why do people always tell us about voting? Why is voting?" But I think, you know, people don't realize how powerful. I think some people don't realize how powerful voting is, because it gives us the opportunity to do so much. And even on the federal perspective, people get all excited about, you know, president. Voting for president. But you can have a president. We saw it with Barack Obama. You can have a president in there, but if the president doesn't have a Congress that is actually willing to make some changes, that president might not get anything done. You might have, you know, the president, when you elect the right president, the president's going to appoint the attorney general who decides, you know, whether or not they're going to prosecute hate crimes and, you know, and do things. They're going to have, you know, they're going to have someone at Housing and Urban Development who's going to make sure that communities are developed equitably. I mean, so, it runs the gamut down to even local government where, who represents you on your city and your county council will be the person who helps move things forward. And so, but one of the things I feel like people, what they don't know, because I get people call me about all kinds of stuff, and I love getting calls from constituents, but what is always kind of strikingly clear is that most people don't know the role of their different elected officials, and people will call me about things that are not within my ability to help. So just so that everybody is clear, what is the role of your congressperson, and what are some of the things that they can do or can stop as it relates to our federal government and federal legislation?
Great question. And yeah, I'll say on the kids thing too. I just want to go back and add the other piece of that's empathy. I think we have to teach our kids empathy. And so whenever we talk to my girls about history, about what's going on, when we talked about Ahmaud Arbery, all these things, we always come back to a role of empathy on it. And I think that's crucial. How would it make you feel? How do you think this person feels? And I remember when my 8-year-old said, wow, like if people are scared to run outside because the police might be mean to them, like that's really a bad place to live. And I was like, yes, it is, and so we have to make sure we're coming at things from a role of empathy and where people can put themselves in a position of someone not like them, right? I can take that mental thought. I think that's so crucial with our children, is to spend some time on empathy. We do it with every book we read, fiction, no matter what it is. We ask those questions. So how does this character feel? How does that character feel? Why? To really teach those skills. So I just had to throw that in there. Sorry.
Yeah, that was great.
Congress. So one of the big things we do is at the congressional level is interface with federal agencies. So if you are a veteran and you're having trouble with the VA, or if you're having trouble with the Social Security Administration, or pick your federal agency. If it's a federal agency, then it's something a congressional office can help that particular individual with, help them navigate, and help maybe get through some red tape if they're having issues. On a legislative level, no federal law can be passed or undone without a bill from Congress. So one of the important things right now, in my mind, is protecting things like Social Security and Medicare. Because for our current administration, chopping that's on the table, and it's done a lot of times when we see different programs cut, it's done through the budget. There's not a law that's passed that says we're going to do away with this, but it says we're going to stop funding Medicare that looks like this. We're going to stop funding Social Security looks like that. And so the federal budget is really important. I think it says a lot about our values and being able to protect things like Social Security or Medicare. Or for instance, I mentioned earlier, my friend that works on STEM education in rural counties in South Carolina. Some of his funding is through a 21st Century Learning grant from the federal government. And so if we're going to cut every 21st Century Learning funding money, all of that gets cut out of the budget, suddenly this program in Barnwell and Bamberg and Allendale doesn't exist anymore. So a lot of times it does have to do with funding streams, but it has to do also with when we have, I think I'd say this, problems with basic law and order, like basic principles of executive power. Congress can step in there, and can hold hearings and can, there's only so much that the president can do without Congress. Now there's stuff he can do, right? He can change implementation on a big scale, or she can change implementation on a scale, but they cannot change laws unilaterally. That takes the Congress to do it. And so that's a lot of what we're doing. I think too, one of the things I have said is we start to looking at what will look like once we're in office and how we want to do. We actually want to have a huge collaborative relationship with people like you, local electeds, so that we can get some things done like the Columbia Canal here or whatever, what you guys need. But also so that when we have constituents that call, or voters that have an issue, we can get them connected to the right office, right? And I have a pretty good network in the nonprofit world as well. And one of the things I would like to see us be able to do is have a really cross-collaborative relationships with cities and counties and towns in our district, where if the issue someone's facing is not something that I can directly affect as a congressperson, I can say, but you know what, this is really a city council issue, and it looks like you're in Tameika Isaacs Devine's district, and you're at large, aren't you?
Yeah.
We can help you. You're at large. We can help you connect there and get it done, where people aren't just left with, I can't help you, goodbye, right? And I want it to be a place where when someone calls you and says, hey, Tameika, I have this problem, I don't know what to do with the VA, you can say, I'm going to connect you with Adair's office. She will handle it for you, and feel confident in that statement that we will get it done. So we really want some of that cross collaboration happening with our local electeds, and so we're trying really hard to make sure we have those relationships there where we can get it done, man. And some things take some movement at the local and the federal level at the same time, and we want to be able to do those partnerships.
Yeah, exactly. And just a perfect example of kind of current is, and I heard Superintendent Spearman on the news tonight, but the president's threat to cut federal funds to school districts who do not open for face-to-face school in 4 weeks, which is ridiculous based on the numbers here in South Carolina. Superintendent Spearman said, she said, well, first of all, I'm not worried because it's not for him to do. It's congressional. And she said,
right.
She has not very little doubt that our congressional delegation will come together on a bipartisan manner to make sure that schools in South Carolina get the resources that they need, because most of the federal dollars that we get here in South Carolina are for special ed programs, are for kind of the 21st century education that you're talking about, for low wealth neighborhoods and things like that. So that would be just crazy if he did that. But that's a whole perfect example that people need to understand, that is that when you have great advocates on the congressional level, doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, they need to be looking out for the folks here in South Carolina. And unfortunately, I mean, I just think that we haven't had that. Want to get to a couple comments, and then I got a question. So Gail asked that question again, because she said, are you, I think there's a missing word. Are you because white people are aware makes it more relevant? So read that one. But Gail also says, I appreciate the discussion on white ally awareness. However, we need to be careful. An issue is not more important because white people join the protest. How can we value the voices, validate the people? Okay, so I think she's clarifying it that. Okay, so I'll let you address that, Adair. But I think I know what you said, but I think you probably meant that not for the awareness of the issue, but for white people, because I think what I've seen is white people actually calling out BS, which has been actually really good. That because I'm gonna be real, completely honest, real talk. It's tiring. And I will say that there have been several issues that I have been the brunt of. I've seen my husband be the brunt of. And it clearly on several levels have been racial. And I get tired of having to call it out. But I will tell you, it's so much better when another white person calls it out, because people can't say I'm playing the race card. They see that, that this white ally is calling their BS. And I think that we need more of that. And I thank you for how you've done that, but we need more of that. But I'm gonna let you address that if you want to. I want to let you address that because Gail, that's a great point, and thank you. But basically, her question is, how can we value the voices and validate the people? But I want to also say, Gary Dennis said, you're correct. Cities and counties need to be careful. An issue is not more important because, they need to be careful. I'm sorry, it went up. Need to work together. This will allow us to push things through the ladder, state and federal level. That is so true. And then Gary says it's not about party because there are some great candidates on both sides of the aisle. There are, Gary. I appreciate it. There are both sides of the aisle, and that's one of the things I've loved about being a local government. We're nonpartisan. I know the county council is not, but we're nonpartisan, and so I've been able to develop relationships on both sides of the aisle and get things done for the folks I represent. But even if I had, the R or the D next to my name, I still should be able to get things done for the people I represent, because everybody who I represent is equally important. So, but I want you, before we run out of time, we've just got a couple more minutes. So before we run out of time, I got one more question, but I want to let you address Gail's point.
Yeah, definitely, Gail, absolutely right. And I did not mean to imply that it was in any way more relevant. My optimism is that maybe some more white people will be checking their own actions, and that there are going to be more allies in movement in it. And I think, just like we said, it's so hard to be in something alone, and it's better if we're all trying to move it together, as far as getting movement. But Gail, absolutely right. And we need to be elevating those voices. We can in our platforms. But frankly, there are still spaces that are majority white, that white people need to be checking some stuff, right? And so I'm optimistic that you're gonna see more white people being allies in that way. So that, yeah, that's that, but absolutely right. I appreciate the comment, very much, and that check there.
So before we run out of time, we've just got a few more minutes. Two quick things I wanted to have you address. And I'll tell you both so you can maybe address it all together in the same time. Number one is about, South Carolina. I think we tend to get disheartened with elections also because people say we are a red state. This is a red district. Columbia, kind of tease people sometimes. I say we're like a blue pond in the middle of a red ocean. And so, we have a little bit, more control here, but statewide, we've had our legislature and our governor's office controlled by Republicans for very, very long. And there are some great Republicans. I have lots of great friends that are Republicans who I think are doing a good job, but there are some that are not. But anyway, that's my little side commentary. But the whole point is, people discount our state. They discount districts that they believe have that have been gerrymandered to be safe districts. And so can you address number one about kind of your campaign and how you are approaching that? Because clearly you have a lot of Republicans. You're running as a Democrat, but you have a lot of Republicans in Congressional District 2. And you have a lot of, people who are not Republican. They're either independent or Democrats who have not been engaged to vote because they just don't feel like their vote's going to matter and move the needle in that district. So kind of how are you approaching that? And then my last one is just how can people learn more about you, your campaign, and support you if they want to?
All right, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And frankly, gerrymandering is one of the things that I think is the worst thing in our current democracy, because you literally have people picking their own voters. And frankly, I think this district was not winnable by someone with a Democrat behind their name in 2012 or 2014, right? But part of so there's two things happening here. One is that the district has changed a bit since the lines were drawn. We have 77,000 new donors. At the time the lines were drawn, Lexington County, which is, quote, more Republican, dominated the district, dominated it in votes. And some people still think of it as kind of as District 2 is Lexington. That's not true anymore. Richland County, which you mentioned is viewed as more Dem or whatever, now has as many votes in the district as Lexington. They are both 1/3 of the votes in the district. And so there's been a little bit of a shift where, frankly, independents and people who are willing to cross over party lines get to matter in a way that they didn't when the lines were drawn. And so we have been talking to voters, and for me, it's not hardcore about party. It's about things that are very bipartisan. My number one issue is rural broadband. There's no way that can or should be partisan. Frankly, the money already exists for a lot of it in the Department of Agriculture and the Department of FCC, and we simply have not had an advocate for our district to help bring some of that infrastructure resource to our district. You look at something like telehealth, there's some federal funding around telehealth. Of every dollar that comes to South Carolina for telehealth, our district gets less than 1 penny. Now, there are 7 congressional districts. That has nothing to do with party, because you got other Republicans and you got Democrats, but less than 1 penny out of every dollar that comes to this state comes to our district, even though we are an entire 1/7 of the state. Why? Because we don't have somebody working for us. And a lot of our messaging about the campaign and what we want to do is actually just work for the people here, work for the people of South Carolina, both parties, whoever they are, in my district, and get some things done. And we just don't have a representative right now doing the work, frankly. He has got all of his money from corporate contributions. You can track his corporate money to his votes every dadgum time, and he does not do what's best for the state and for the people in it. He voted against free coronavirus testing. He voted against veterans health care 6 times. Suppose my twin brother is a veteran, and taking care of our military families are very important to me. And I have a guy in there who claims he does. But then we also have military families here at Fort Jackson and Columbia living in homes with mold and other issues that if it were a private entity, frankly, I'd be suing them. So they're not getting taken care of, and that's not a partisan issue. And so when we talk about those things, we find out there are a lot of people that really want someone that will just work for them. And it's not all about party. And frankly, we have polling on it, and it's really, really good. People are tired of having someone in office not getting things done, and they are ready for someone who has done the work in their career, who's from here, and get people. So we got the numbers to prove it. And I'm feeling really, really good about where we are. We also have support in our donors that, like Wilson's money is all corporate money. We have donors from across the state, but definitely in the district. And 80% of our donations are under $100. That's saying people want something different, right? 80% are under $100, and we've raised $1.2 million and outraised him. That says something about what people want. So yeah, we're gonna win this thing. That said, if you want to get involved, you can do it at adairforcongress.com. That's ADAIRFORcongress.com. You can sign up to volunteer. You can contribute. You can read more about my bio and my issues there. And you can always reach out to us. One of my big things in the campaign and in office is being accessible to people here. So if you reach out to us, you will get a response. That's a promise from me. So our email address is on the website there. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you message us, you will get a response. That's my promise to you.
Great. Well, I thank you so much. I know you are super busy. You have been out there, even in this global pandemic, and you can't be out there shaking hands. Literally, you have been on the phones. You have been touching bases. You've been raising money, and you've been still homeschooling because kids are home and you're a mom. And so I feel that too. And so I thank you for taking time out of your, and Gail said, oh, and that's great. Plus she likes Brie. But yeah. But anyway, so I thank you for your time. I just appreciate it because I know you're super busy and we don't have much time. So I want to encourage folks that if, first of all, if Adair has said anything that touches you, yes, reach out to her, look at her, her campaign, whether you're in the district or not. If you want to help her, then I strongly encourage you to, reach out again and volunteer, donate money. Like she said, you got 80% of donations under $100. I know people who give $10, $15, $25, and that makes a difference. And so I want to encourage you to support her. I'm very optimistic. Again, I feel like we're at a place, we're at a crossroads in our country that there are so many things that we can get done and we can get them done right, but we need the right people in order to move the needle forward. If we don't have the right people, if we've got the same old people doing the same old thing, we're going to get the same old thing. And, that's not where I want I don't want my girls. I don't want to see my 14-year-old activist who believes that, her voice, even though she can't vote, makes a difference. And so she's actually in there making signs right now. I mean, they've been out of school and she's been making signs for different things. So I want them to know that. And so I think they will know that through, having folks like you. So thank you again for your time, Adair. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys being here. I do want to kind of give a plug for next week's, because I don't usually have my guests lined up this early. So I have my next week's guest. We're going to talk about community associations. I put out on my Facebook page, I asked the question, how many folks are involved in your community association? And, I had people say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Then I had some people say, no, same old people run it, this, that, and the other. And one of the things, again, I found that when people have come to us, especially for, police reform and different things, and they're asking for stuff that we're actually already doing at CPD. And I've said, I said, do you know we do this? Or do you know we do that? No, I had no idea. Well, part of it is folks are not engaged in their community associations. And I know we're all busy. We all have a lot of time. But I've got two amazing City of Columbia community leaders who have been able to really make some real impactful change in their neighborhoods because of their advocacy. And so I'm going to interview them to talk about how you can get involved and really make a difference. So I'm excited about that. So anyway, so see me come back next Monday at 7. And for those of you who did watch us, and I hope you share Adair's message, share this broadcast so people can hear from Adair. But again, AdairForCongress.com. Go there, donate, volunteer, find out more, and then share. Tell people whether you live in Congressional District 2 or not. Tell people about Adair and make sure that they come out to vote in November. So until next time, I am Tameika Isaac Devine. I will see you next week for another engaging community conversation. Thank you. Good night and God bless.